Chapter 5 Friends, Part 1.
It's stuck,
Twilight told Applejack. She tugged a key out of the jammed locking mechanism keeping Applejack caged. Applejack's earlier attempt to break out on her own had left the metal twisted and warped. Twilight sighed in frustration, then suppressed a pained groan. When she breathed, she felt like she had a spike lodged in her side. She gritted her teeth and tolerated the discomfort, at least for the moment. Applejack nickered and stamped furiously in the small space. Well, I ain't staying in here. She turned around, aligning her hindquarters with the cage door. Guess I'll just have to finish what I started. Twilight took a couple of steps back to get clear of the door.
Wait a second, I have an idea.
She laced her levitation magic around the grate of the cage and started to pull.
All right, now go.
Applejack's next buck shattered the locking mechanism, flinging the door wide open. Before Twilight could react, her levitation tore the door's damaged hinges clean off and sent it flying straight at her with dangerous speed. She released her magic in shock while she ducked beneath the metal. The deformed grate sailed over her head, hit the dirt, and rolled across the tent on its corners. The metal came to a stop with a ringing clang when it slammed into the open cage where Rainbow and Fluttershy had recently been trapped. She winced, both at the loud sound that stung her ears, and at the way the rapid motion to evade the grate had driven the pain in her chest to new heights.
I'm walking over here,
Rarity cried in exasperation. She sat in front of a cage, picking the lock, her bow slung across her back. She'd gotten the door to Fluttershy's cage open with only her levitation before Pinkie had found the keys.
Sorry,
Twilight said. She crossed her eyes to look at her horn. She didn't think her levitation was that strong.
The hinges must have been mostly broken already then,
she concluded. Thanks, Twilight, Applejack said, stepping out of the cage.
The great and powerful Trixie will not stand for this. A projectile has painfully punctured her posterior and she demands treatment.
Trixie whined from the ground where she lay near the tent's door. Rainbow stood guard over the prone unicorn, one of her wing blades poised near Trixie's throat. Rainbow groaned.
Shut up already.
Applejack flicked her head towards Trixie. Now what do you think we should do with her? She asked softly to Twilight. Twilight flashed Applejack a smile.
I've got an idea.
Twilight stepped forward. While she approached Trixie, she brushed dried blood off her muzzle with a hoof and put on her most confident expression. She felt like a beaten dog. She hoped she looked like a victor.
I'll tell you what, Trixie,
Twilight said, standing over Trixie as she levitated a healing potion.
I will consider giving you this if you dispel the illusion you've put on Fluttershy's wings.
Trixie looked up at the potion from the floor and nodded eagerly.
Done.
Twilight looked up at where Fluttershy sat next to the edge of the tent. The white bunny snuggled against her, back to his original, adorable, small self. Fluttershy's wings gradually faded into existence on her back, confirming her identity as a Pegasus. Twilight smiled. She had correctly identified the spell hiding Fluttershy's wings as long-term, sustained magic, like her mage armor.
Now give Trixie the potion,
Trixie said. Twilight held up her hoof.
I'm thinking
we should just kill her and be done with it, Applejack said with a grumble from beside Twilight.
Does she really deserve that?
Pinkie asked as she stepped up on Twilight's other side. She'll cause no end of trouble if we let her go, Applejack said. Twilight looked down at Trixie. The baby blue unicorn stared back at Twilight in defiance, but her eyes betrayed her fear.
If we kill her, would we deserve to die?
Twilight murmured. It ain't about that, Twilight. Killing her isn't right because she deserves to die. Killing her is right because it'll keep Pony safe from her, Applejack said. Twilight continued to stare down at Trixie. She wanted to kill Trixie. She wanted to wipe that arrogant smirk from the face of Equestria. Trixie had manipulated her, hurt her, and attempted to kill her by proxy. But still, she couldn't decide.
But what does that mean about us?
Twilight said, then paused, remembering something Starswirl had told her months ago. She turned to look into Applejack's eyes.
Doesn't everyone deserve a chance at redemption?
The difference was Starswirl had said it with conviction, while she could only question.
The great and powerful Trixie is sorry for hurting you. She promises she will be better,
Trixie said quickly. Applejack snorted. There ain't nothing she can say that we can trust.
I think Fluttershy should decide, Rainbow said. Out of all of us, she's been hurt the most by this pony. Oh,
Fluttershy said softly from where she sat.
I don't know.
Her voice faded, becoming too quiet for Twilight to hear.
I agree with Rainbow Dash,
Twilight said. She felt a little selfish for shifting the weight of the decision onto Fluttershy's shoulders, but if anyone should decide, it was Trixie's former slave.
I don't think you should kill her,
Fluttershy said, loud enough to be heard this time.
Even though she was mean and nasty to me, every pony deserves a chance.
Applejack sighed. Fair enough. Mark my words, she'll be trouble. Twilight started to levitate the potion down toward Trixie, but Fluttershy stepped forward before she could give it to the wounded illusionist.
I could heal her,
she murmured.
But you look like you need it more.
Twilight watched Fluttershy approach. As soon as the demure Pegasus stood next to her, she pressed a hoof into Twilight's injured side. Twilight groaned in pain, collapsing onto her haunches. Fluttershy's eyes widened.
Oh dear, you've got a broken rib. Oh, I'm so sorry Angel hurt you. I was just so frightened, and...
Fluttershy said.
It's okay.
Twilight interrupted.
It was Trixie's fault, not yours.
She glared at the tiny white rabbit hanging onto Fluttershy's tail.
And his.
The rabbit blew her a raspberry.
He only gets like that when I'm really scared,
Fluttershy said. She focused her blue eyes on Twilight, and a natural green glow filled them. Twilight sighed in contentment as a warmth spreading from Fluttershy's hoof purged her injuries. Her side felt whole again, the soreness in her jaw disappeared, and even the gashes on her neck and shoulders were healed.
Thank you,
Twilight said. Fluttershy's head drooped wearily as she finished the spell, but she picked up a moment later. She turned to Trixie and carefully extracted the crystalline arrow with her teeth. Twilight returned her healing potion to her bag, leaving the task to Fluttershy. Twilight focused on the entrance to the tent when she heard a commotion outside. In her peripheral vision, she saw her friends ready themselves for a fight. She drew Solstice. A moment later, the Madame burst into the tent. She froze in the entrance when she saw Rainbow's wing blade poised against Trixie's neck. A number of armed carnival folk came to an abrupt stop behind the Madame.
Don't kill her,
the Madame cried.
You can have the Pegasus.
She looked around the tent at the open cages.
And the rest of the slaves can go free. That sounds like a good...
Twilight began, but Rarity interrupted her before she could finish by saying,
That sounds like a bit of a raw deal. I imagine that a wizard of Trixie's caliber is what keeps your carnival safe on the road.
Twilight hadn't even noticed the white unicorn step up beside her.
"I have some magic items. Enough cloaks of protection for all of you. That would be good for adventurers like you, yes?"
the madam said.
"Not a wizard,"
Twilight grumbled. Trixie's brand of spellcasting had all the marks of sorcery.
"Shush, darling, I'm negotiating,"
Rarity whispered out the side of her mouth at Twilight with thinly veiled irritation. She tapped her chin with her hoof, then addressed the madam.
"That sounds almost fair. You give us those, and the slaves their freedom, complete with papers to confirm it, along with 50 bits for each of them, and then you'll get your wizard back."
The madam shook her head, but she said,
"Agreed. You robbed me, unicorn. Now let her go."
Rarity smiled sweetly at her.
Papers, bits, and cloaks first. We'll let you have her back at the edge of the carnival."
The dozen or so slaves gratefully trailed behind Twilight and her group while they walked back towards town. Twilight held her blade to Trixie's neck, eyeing the carnies that surrounded them on all sides wearily. They carried a motley collection of weaponry, but Twilight didn't think they looked like they wanted to fight. At least not while she had Trixie as a hostage.
"How'd she do all that anyway?"
Rainbow asked. She leaped through the air above Trixie, inspecting the sorceress as she passed over before coming down to land beside Twilight.
"She's a sorceress. Some sorcerers can cast a variety of spells through innate understanding, but Trixie's a bit more unique. She can only do one type of magic, but she's very, very good at it,"
Twilight said.
"Isn't that right, Trixie?"
Trixie nodded aloofly.
"The great and powerful Trixie's abilities are awe-inspiring."
Rainbow glared at her.
"And she uses them to pretend to be something she's not."
Trixie thrust her nose into the air.
"The great and powerful Trixie spoke only the truth. Her illusion magic makes her the most magically gifted pony in Equestria, and she was truly a crystal pony. How else could she know what the Crystal City looks like,
Rainbow laughed.
"Yeah, right. You're a crystal pony and I'm an alicorn."
She wiggled her head with an annoying expression plastered on her face.
"See my horn?"
Trixie ignored Rainbow's taunting and continued to walk proudly alongside Twilight. Failing to get a rise out of her, Rainbow gave up and settled down.
Psst, what's a crystal pony?
She whispered to Twilight a moment later. Twilight wished she could stop walking and plant her face in her hooves. Lacking that option, she chose to simply give a brief lecture.
"Well, crystal ponies were crystalline ponies that crystal ponies were crystalline? You don't say!"
Pinky said playfully from behind Twilight, interrupting. Twilight rolled her eyes and continued.
"That lived in the Crystal City, at the heart of the Crystal Empire over 1,000 years ago. They were destroyed during the time of troubles, and there's been no record of them since, so it would be quite impossible for Trixie to be one."
"Time of troubles?" Rainbow asked.
"Yeah, I'll tell you about it another time,"
Twilight said.
Don't worry about it. I'm sure it was some cataclysmic event of epic proportions that happened too long ago for any pony to remember or for me to care,"
Rainbow said. Twilight sighed. The transfer went off without a hitch. While the madam and her group returned to the carnival grounds, Twilight clasped one of the silky gray cloaks around her neck. The magic made the silk strong as steel, and the cloak would keep her warm in the cold and cool in the sun. The enchantment would even offer her minor protection against spells. A moment later, an odd sensation passed through her, and she felt like Spike was about to return. She turned her head, looking at the spot on the ground next to her, and in a flare of green fire, Spike appeared precisely where she expected him to. She smiled.
Your timing is improving.
Spike grinned back up at her. I'm learning. He scratched the back of his head. I think I can, feel when you feel safe. Earlier it was more guesswork. He pointed at the yellow Pegasus standing next to Rainbow Dash. So she's the pony you guys rescued, huh? Twilight nodded, her ears perking when Fluttershy whispered something. She thought she heard Fluttershy say something about a baby dragon. Nah, he's just a familiar or something, Rainbow said. Well, actually, Spike cut in, running over to the rest of the group. Twilight shook her head with amusement. Apparently, Fey Dragon shared ego as well as appearance with their namesake. She turned her gaze toward Ponyville, watching the last of the former slaves make their way toward the town. She hoped that the 50 bits they each had would last long enough for them to get settled, or if they had them, get back to their families. She noticed Rarity sitting a bit away from the rest of the group, staring after the slaves. While Spike conversed excitedly with her friends, she walked over and plopped down on her haunches next to Rarity.
That was the reason you came to the carnival tonight, wasn't it? To set them free?
She asked.
Wasn't that why you were here?
Rarity countered as she turned to look at Twilight. The question caught her off guard. After a pause, she said,
Well, sort of. Specifically, we were there to help Rainbow Dash free Fluttershy. But I don't think I could have left the other ponies caged.
She turned her gaze down to the ground in front of her.
I mean, I don't care if it's technically illegal. It's wrong, isn't it? I don't know, Twilight. That is your name, right?
Rarity said. Twilight nodded and Rarity continued.
Does the idea of taking a pony's destiny away from them and turning them into a piece of property sound right to you?
Twilight shook her head.
Of course not.
She wasn't sure how much stock she put in fate, but she did agree with Rarity's sentiment.
Precisely. Now, the ponies who benefit from slaves will attempt to justify it as a due punishment for crimes committed or a legitimate spoil of war. But even if they were right, plenty of slaves are just poor, innocent ponies.
Rarity said.
Take Fluttershy, for example. Probably just captured by slavers, had documents forged, then had her wings hidden to avoid unwanted scrutiny. Well, thank you for your help,
Twilight said.
Almost every day out here, somebody has to save my life,
she thought bitterly.
We should probably get back to town, though. We'll need to rent rooms for the rest of the night. Absolutely not,
Rarity said.
I insist that you come stay at my boutique. There's more than enough room for all of you there, and I never would have had the opportunity to help those ponies if it weren't for you and your friends.
Twilight glanced at Rarity.
So you were planning this for a while?
Rarity shook her head.
No. It would have been futile to try and help them on my own. Every year the carnival came to town, I wished I could do something. But after I heard about that business in Barry Punch's tavern, I started to keep a close eye on your group. At the carnival, I learned you were trying to help a slave, and when you snuck in this evening, well, I knew I had to seize the moment. And I'm glad I did.
She smiled at Twilight. Twilight furrowed her brows. The amount of attention she attracted troubled her, even though in this case she had stood to benefit from it. If the Black Knight was still on the hunt, he could almost be upon them just following the trail she left in her wake. Surrounded by allies, maybe she could beat him, but she doubted it. Even though wizards of Star Swirl's caliber were not to be trifled with, the Black Knight made killing him almost look easy. She knew that if the Black Knight caught up with them, she would die. And if her friends made the same choice Starswirl did, they would die as well. Twilight noticed Rarity giving her a confused look and quickly brightened her expression.
We'd be happy to stay at your boutique.
Hopefully, Rarity's shop would be better than the tavern at keeping them out of the spotlight. We're staying where now? Applejack asked from the side. The gates of Candlekeep were open wide to Twilight Sparkle. She knew no shelter awaited her within, but she found herself irrevocably drawn to the shadows beyond the gate. Unable to walk away, she drifted into the main hall of the library. A form moved on the stairway to the upper levels. The figure resolved into the Black Knight. He strode silently down the steps toward her, his very presence defiling her beloved books. Ready to fight, and if need be to die, Twilight reached for her sword, but she found nothing. She felt naked, as unprotected and ill-prepared as when this adventure had first begun. The Black Knight raised no weapon to strike her down. Instead, he stopped, standing on the stone floor before her. Fluttershy, still and statuesque, cowering behind her wooden guardian, appeared from the shadows next to him. A shadowy voice emanated from his helmet.
Fluttershy the healer. Alongside Rainbow Dash, she will join you. But can she heal you?
The Black Knight turned, taking one pace to the left. Beside Fluttershy, Rarity appeared, her bow ready, a sinister light in her eyes.
Rarity the Enigma. She will ask to join you. But can you trust her? Noble though she may seem, deception is her game, and you will be made a fool.
The Black Knight took another step. Next was Rainbow Dash, wing blades ready, unbridled fury on her face.
Rainbow Dash the fighter. She will fight for you. She will kill for you. But when she finally cracks, what will happen to you?
Another pace. This time, Applejack appeared, armored, glancing over her shoulder, chain at the ready behind her.
Applejack the Guardian. She will not waver from her task, at least until she realizes exactly what it is she guards.
One more step. Finally, Pinkie appeared, hair straight, hooves planted, a dark look on her features.
Pinkie Pie the friend. She has stood by you all this while, through trauma and trials. But in the end, when she sees who you truly are, what will happen then?
Twilight shook her head. The others, perhaps. She hardly knew them, but not Pinkie. She knew Pinkie. Something was wrong here. She found her thoughts, her identity, and with her voice challenged the shadow for the first time.
What I truly am? All I am is a friend, a wizard, and a scared mare trying to survive. I'm nothing more.
The Black Knight loomed before her. She saw him, close, every detail the way she remembered. Every chink in his armor, and every contour of his terrifying helmet.
You will find that I am you, and you are me. And you and I
The Black Knight coalesced into a bolt of shadow. He whispered through the air, black ink spilling from his form as he traced black lines around the 5 statues of her friends.
We?
The statues came to life. Together they turned away from her, not even giving her a passing glance.
Are?
Her 5 friends strode away from her. She could only watch in silence as they left her.
Alone.
The Black Knight's form rushed through the chamber as a wind, becoming one with the darkness around her. As her friends walked away, they began to crumble. Brightly colored dust, yellow, white, blue, orange, and pink, spilled from their bodies until they finally dissolved away into the same featureless black. Only Twilight remained. A deep horror filled her. Alone, friendless, the shadows would consume her. Still, she held her head high, defiant. She rejected the idea. Her friends would not leave her, and again she challenged the darkness.
I am you, and you are me? What does that even mean?